money off of it right now.
Here, let me make sure I'm recording the correct screeny. Let's make sure I'm gonna record this. I might as well. That way I don't have to do all this again. It's a lot of torture. A lot of torture here. So this is the Harmony YouTube channel, very popular, 170,000 subscribers, big Orthodox channel. You can see so many of their videos are members only because they want you to be giving them regular monthly money, 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 money. And did I mention money, money? Anyway, they've got this video called Hidden History of Early Christian Icons, which we're going to react to in just a moment here. But I just wanted to point out, they've got Patreon. They want to be subscribed on Patreon. And then there's their website, Harmony Icons. They want you to be buying their products. They advertise them pretty frequently in all their videos. So this is their website. They're saying, buy some icons, buy them. We make them ourselves. We make all kinds. We make bookmarks. We sell canvases. We sell T-shirts. Buy the T-shirts. Buy the T-shirts. And we've got bookmarks. We've got it all. Come on. And so these people are really holy, and they made this.
Heaven.
I'm not gonna make you sit through this whole thing, Nolan. It's so painful. But I want you to see who the writer is, who wrote this documentary.
Oh, our friend Craig Truglia.
Yeah, Craig Druglia did it. Here, I'm gonna start you out with a really great part. Before we get into it, I just want to start you with this part. You're gonna enjoy this.
Depicted and the grace residing in that individual. For this reason, many modern Roman Catholics and Protestants, though appreciating their art, do not understand their art properly as icons. They do not pray towards these depictions, kiss them, or believe that they exude power as windows into heaven.
See those Catholics and Protestants, they don't treat these icons properly. Let's hear it one more time.
Appreciating their art. For this reason, many modern Roman Catholics and Protestants, though appreciating their art, do not understand their art properly as icons. They do not pray towards these depictions, kiss them, or believe that they exude power as windows into heaven.
Just kissy kissy coo your little icon. Got
They
a
love to say we're not actually praying towards the icon. We're praying towards what the icon represents. But
yeah, yeah. But he
that
says,
seems a little different
but of
here.
course they believe they're powerful. These icons are powerful magical items, and we're not superstitious. But listen, they're imbued with power. He just said they're full of power, and don't forget that one time. Never forget the time, according to that folklore invented by the Orthodox, which they put on their websites when they talk about these stories. One of those websites has got at the very top. They say you better respect those icons of Mary, because once a monk passed by an icon of Mary in his monastery, and then she yelled at him from the icon. The icon spoke, and it said, "How dare you get soot from your torch onto my face? Clean me right now." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mother Mary, I'm sorry." Okay, but we're not actually going to spend 42 minutes. Well, at least I'm not going to watch this whole thing. We may be in here for 42 minutes, but we're not actually going to watch this. Way too much pain. I'm just going to tell you what this documentary is like. Here, I'll put the link to it if you guys enjoyed torture. If you enjoy lies. What the heck kind of a thumbnail is that anyway? Just disturbing. I mean, demonic. This is a saint, by the way. It's the dog-headed saint. Uh,
What?
yeah. So let's listen to this. Um, they do all this. I mean, they're so snazzy with their editing, and of course, if you've got really good editing, then you must be teaching the truth. So they go over and they say, "Don't you know there were lots of pictures? There were lots of pictures in a lot of these early buildings."
A figure of a praying woman. All the tombs have these, so she's well aware of the painting's purpose. Her eyes locked with those of the figure. The latter is pointed upwards, inviting her to look. She lifts her head to the ceiling, emulating the figure's posture of prayer, directing her gaze to the icon of the Good Shepherd, praying.
Whoa, there's Jesus, guys. And of course, we've got lots of images like this of Jesus. But they're always clearly these Greco-Roman depictions of Jesus, totally inaccurate, shaved. And they do say that is Jesus. Wait until you see some more of the icons. They're all the same, all the earliest images. The people making these pictures are not wise people. If they had wisdom, they would not be insulting their maker by depicting him, not even in a masculine way, but in an effeminate way, accusing him of actually committing a sin, because it is a sin to deface yourself, to deface the image of God, and take off the token of manhood.
To God, the good shepherd of his sheep, for the peaceful repose of her cousin. She takes comfort in his mercy.
This is the documentary.
This has been her custom for the last 7 years.
This is just a little hypothetical story they created. So what do they do? What's this documentary? What's this documentary consist of? It consists of going to the Jews. For about half of this video, they talk about the Jews making the cherubim. We've already sufficiently refuted this. You guys have heard it
Do they
before.
bring up Jesus bowing to the ark? Do they bring that up?
Joshua bowing to the ark, which never actually happened, but how blasphemous to suggest that Joshua or any of the priests bowed to the ark itself when the Lord promised to appear above the ark between the cherubim. He says, I'll appear between the cherubim or in the midst of the cherubim. So he's actually going to appear right between them visibly. But the Catholics and Orthodox say, well, no, the priest is not actually bowing to Jesus. No. They're bowing to the ark. They're venerating the ark. And Jesus, he's kind of like a side note. He's kind of there in the background, not really the main point, not the main object. He kind of actually gets in the way, honestly, because we're trying to venerate the ark here, and that's what the Jews were all about. God appearing physically above the ark, not so important. The ark itself, though, clearly the whole point of this bowing. He's directing his bow toward the ark, not the one actually standing there.
It's the chair of the king, not the king sitting in it.
Yeah, we got to bow to the chair. Well, wait until you hear him. I may not even be able to find where they said it in here, but they say, that the ark is the footstool of God. And in the Bible it says, bow at his footstool. Therefore, we ought to bow to the footstool. The footstool is what needs to be venerated. Even though it's very obvious when it calls the ark the footstool of God, it's talking about the fact that he literally appears on top of it with his feet touching it or just being right above it. How can they miss something so obvious? Painful. Who are you bowing to? Are you bowing to the ark or the one appearing above it once a year? And I know we already said this in another video, but just in case any Catholics is watching this, understand that the ark was never put on display for the children of Israel. If you're going to say that's our perfect analogy of an icon, and that's the prototype of icons, why was it not on display for people to look at and admire? Why was it hidden under a veil? No one was allowed to look at it except once a year. And when it was seen once a year, who was appearing above it? Jesus, God in physical form. And yet you want to claim that the ark is actually what's being venerated and looked at, but you're really just showing that you are actually accidentally admitting you substitute veneration for God for venerating the icon or the ark. You'd rather venerate the physical object than really God himself. That's more important to you. Thank you for admitting that. So all he does is say, early Christians had lots of pictures. And they say, of course, they can't prove that any of this was actually approved by God. And so it's the ark. That's all we're going to talk about is the ark, which was never put on display for anybody to look at. And yeah, look at these things, a candlestick. That's kind of like an icon, right? And again, our emphasis is on the action being performed. Bowing to images, kissing them, lighting candles to them, crowning them, or the worst of them all, burning incense to images. According to the scriptures, that is a spiritual service that you make to God. It's similar to making a sacrifice. In fact, let's hear Tertullian make a certain statement about this. Let's hear Tertullian make a little statement about incense. Here's our dear Tertullian. I'm just going to read this real quick and we'll watch this painful video, just a few clips from it. Tertullian says
I think you're sharing the wrong screen.
Oh, whoopsie. Left or right? Wait. Wait a second. Are you serious? Nobody even said anything. Left screen. Is this better? 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 Is this better Thank you. Nolan, you should have said something. What does Tertullian say? Tertullian says, most men simply regard idolatry as to be interpreted as in these senses alone. If one burn incense or immolate a victim, that means burn a sacrificial lamb or something, or give a sacrificial banquet, or be bound in some sacred functions or priesthoods. So the first thing Tertullian mentions when he says, this is what most men regard idolatry as constituting, he says burning incense. That is the spiritual worship. That's latreia that you give to a deity. And so, what do we do then with these people? They do every single thing that they're not allowed to do, both the bowing and the burning the incense to their blocks of wood. We'll skip through this. I mean, it's painful just going on and on. Oh my goodness, guys. They talk about the mezuzahs. They talk about these little blocks which contain scripture written in Hebrew, which the Jews would put on their walls. They'd have a scripture written and they'd stick it on the wall. And they're saying, well, look, the mezuzahs, this is kind of like having an icon on your wall. This is what a mezuzah is. It means doorpost. Mezuzahs are placed on the doorposts of every home containing certain scriptures of the Bible written on parchment inside. Whoa, guys, that's like an icon. Whoa, look, there are the caves of Qumran. They've got mezuzahs in there. Whoa, are you guys convinced yet? Oh, and then this is crazy. They go to the phylacteries. They say, having a phylactery where you venerate the scriptures and you put it on your head like an idiot is very similar to icon veneration. So again, guys, they don't even hide it. They are Jews, and not wise Jews, because there were some Jews who actually understood the law in a spiritual sense when God says you should bind them on your foreheads, bind them on your hands. But these people do it literally. They say, we want to stick this thing on our forehead. Man, they are really Jewish, aren't they? Where's the proof from church history? Where's the proof from church history? Can you believe they actually quote Justin Martyr in here, telling them how stupid
No.
they are? They actually put it in here.
It's so
Here's
carnal.
Justin Martyr. He says, God commanded you to wear a phylactery, certain characters, which indeed we consider holy, being engraved in very thin parchment, and by these means stirring you up to retain a constant remembrance of God.
Constant remembrance of God. As one can see.
And then he goes on. There's more from Justin, but it's kind of mixed up in the video. But he quotes the other part from Justin where he says, but we Christians understand this better than you do. In the spiritual sense.
Jewish interlocutor. He commanded you.
I'm pretty sure he does put that in the video, though. I don't know where he puts that. You can look up the context. I mean, Justin is not actually endorsing that. He's bashing them to no end. And where is the evidence, guys? Remember, guys, if anybody wants to convince you of a doctrine, a Christian doctrine, the only question you ought to have is, so show me where the church unanimously teaches that. That should be your only question. Look at this. 11 minutes go by in this 42-minute documentary. No mention yet that, the church unanimously taught this for many centuries, from the beginning. No mention. Instead, it's, mezuzahs, they had little scriptures written on their walls. That's kind of like having an icon, or phylacteries, or the Ark of the Covenant, none of which come anywhere near. Desperation. Why don't people sense the desperation? Anyway, then he's talking about signs of having the cross in homes. This is a funny part. This is actually really hilarious. They're like, the early Christians really, really revered the sign of the cross, and they say Tertullian says that they crossed themselves, and so does Saint Dionysius the Areopagite. Does anybody sense anything strange going on here when you're trying to provide proof that the early Christians do something? You quote first Tertullian, and then Dionysius the Areopagite. Who the heck is that? And notice how they say Dionysius the Areopagite, 1st century. What? Have you guys ever heard of Dionysius the Areopagite? Any of you guys? Can we have a show of hands? Anybody? Yeah, if you have not heard of Dionysius the Areopagite, don't feel bad. That's like a person in the 600s who wrote a book claiming to be the Dionysius mentioned in the book of Acts. And they say, we're that guy. We're Dionysius. And guys, it's the dumbest thing if you look it up. I mean, if you ever read it, I read a few chapters from it. everybody calls it pseudo Dionysus the Areopagite because it's obviously not Dionysus the Areopagite. He uses all kinds of language, guys, that is from councils in like the 400s and 500s. It's the fakest thing you ever saw. This, and it's a huge book, but it's clearly not written by somebody in the first century, a disciple of Paul. I just find that so pathetic. Tertullian and a completely fake writing claiming to be someone from the first century, which nobody actually believes to be from the first century. They both say Christians were really big on the sign of the cross, but he brings him up early on because he wants to use Dionysus the Areopagite again later in the video.
Sees the Areopagite, a disciple of Paul mentioned in the scriptures, also attests to the practice of signing the cross, solidifying its apostolic pedigree. This practice finds further corroboration in archaeological evidence, as approximately 24 carved crosses from before 79 AD have been...
Whoa! I'm sorry, I have to restrain myself from laughing. These guys are so... look at that little thing. They're like, these Christians were really big on venerating the cross. See, like this sidewalk where we got this little scratch here? This proves it. Those Christians were all about this. I mean, it's hard not to laugh, isn't it, guys? All right, we're gonna try to keep a straight face, though. We're gonna keep going. He's like, look, you can see crosses here. Look at this. That's kind of like a cross.
Equilateral crosses are identifiable from the reign of King Hezekiah.
Why is he now trying to prove that this is in Judaism?
The ancient Judahites may have borrowed the cross from the ancient Assyrians, who used the equilateral sun cross as a royal...
What is he even talking about at this point? Are you not confused? I'm confused. I did watch this whole thing, by the way, but I'm just saying, what in the world? Now you're trying to say that the Jews actually had crosses and that they copied it from the ancient Persians who worshiped the sun god? Okay, we're going to keep going before we lose our minds. We're a little confused here. Oh, this is a good part. You will enjoy this part, though.
In 62 AD. This square, like the mezuzah, places a hidden scripture, a cryptographic Lord's Prayer, in front of a building like a home. Like crosses, these Satyr squares were found throughout the ancient world. The second earliest found in Dura Europos, Syria, as early as 165 AD. As one can see, the letters tenet, in fact, form a cross in the square, the symbol thought to exude power, presumably through prayer.
The symbol thought to exude power. Are you guys confused? I am so confused. What in the world is happening right now? Can we just get some quotes from the church fathers telling us we're supposed to be bowing to the images and burning incense to them? You're telling me something about Persians or Babylonians invented worship of the sun god and made the sun shaped like a square, and then maybe the Jews copied that and they wrote the word tenet in a square, and this exudes power. And yeah, it's like something you'd make to mock Christianity, to say that they get their practices from Jews and the Jews get it from Persians or something. But man, oh man, this is painful. Let's see if we can get through a little bit more. More about the mezuzahs, more about the phylacteries. Of course, the Ark of the Covenant must be bowed to, but not the one actually appearing above the Ark of the Covenant. Heaven forbid that, you crazy idolaters. All right, okay, he's got Eusebius finally.
Eusebius of Caesarea, Christianity expanded. In fact, Christianity's premier pre-Nicene historian, Eusebius of Caesarea, locates the origin of Christian iconography to the time of the apostles themselves.
The location of Christian iconography to the time of the apostles themselves. All right, we're ready for some evidence we've never heard before. Are you guys ready?
He does so when commenting on a statue he was told about from Paneas. It was reported that there was a miraculous plant growing upon it that effected healings when one bowed down and touched its bronze cloak, in imitation of the hemorrhaging woman in the Gospels. This participatory element clearly was an act of veneration of the statue. You see...
What? Did you hear what he just said?
This participatory element clearly was an act of veneration of the statue.
So he said bowing down to grab this plant that happened to be a medicinal plant that was growing at the foot, maybe somebody planted it there, that was an act of veneration.
This participatory element clearly was an act of veneration of the statue.
So this participatory element, like if you get on your knee and you grab this plant, like you are venerating this bronze statue. And who made this bronze statue?
Eusebius made a further observation that illuminates the earliest history of Christian iconography.
The earliest history of Christian iconography. So the Christians made this, is that right?
They said that this statue bore the image of Jesus, and it remained even for us, so that when we came, we might see it ourselves in the city. And it is nothing marvelous when we have observed icons of his apostles, Paul and Peter, and of Christ himself preserved in paintings with colors, as it is likely that the ancients without concern honored them in this way as saviors according to their custom.
Can you guys believe he cut out, before and after these statements here, he completely cut out the fact that that our boy Eusebius says this is a pagan statue. No Christian made this. The pagans made it, as we pointed out in our recent video. But this they just cannot stop repeating this same ridiculous lie. Here's the actual quote, everybody. For there stands upon an elevated stone by the gates of her house a brazen image of a woman kneeling with her hand stretched out as if she were praying. And now he's saying, this is something that was made in the city. He says, as if she were praying. Opposite this is another upright image of a man made of the same material, clothed decently in a double cloak, and extending his hand toward the woman. They say that this statue is an image of Jesus. Nor is it strange that those of the pagans, this is the Greek word, pagan, who of old were benefited by our Savior, should have done such things. The ancients being accustomed, as it is likely, according to a habit of the pagans, to pay this kind of honor indiscriminately to those regarded by them as deliverers. Is this Christian iconography? No. It's condemned twice by Eusebius as pagan practice. He couldn't have been more explicit, and yet these liars, Craig Truglia and this guy who made this ridiculous documentary, they're bringing people as witnesses, and these people are condemning iconolatry. That's what this is called when you worship icons. And he's saying, yeah, this is the best evidence we have. Are you convinced?
Without concern, honored them in this way as saviors according to their custom. While some read the proceeding as Eusebius critiquing icons, the opposite is likely the case. In other books of
I see. Some people read it as him critiquing it. Really, the opposite is the case.
his, Eusebius extols the existence of Christian art in Constantinople and at Mamre.
Wow. Wowzers. Painful. So, just your lying eyes, they're lying to you. See, guys, we know that people made pictures. We know that they made pictures, but that wasn't something that they considered to have been from the apostles, to make pictures of Christ. They didn't say we should be bowing to them or offering incense. Eusebius instead says in his actual writings that it's very unflattering and insulting to always remember Christ in the flesh. Because he's not in the flesh anymore. That's not how we remember him. Paul says we don't know him according to the flesh anymore, even though we did at one time. Yes, we know people made pictures. We know that they were very pretty. We know that Eusebius has before said that these pictures are pretty. But he does say making a statue of Christ is a pagan custom. And showing any kind of veneration to a statue of anybody is a pagan custom. Why in the world, by the way, are the Orthodox, because this is an Orthodox channel, using evidence of a statue existing as some kind of justification for what they're doing? Because they actually consider venerating statues to be a sin. According to the Second Council of Nicaea, they say Jesus and the saints should never, ever be depicted as a statue. They say that actually is closer to idolatry, and that we should only make unrealistic depictions of Jesus in a two-dimensional format, never 3D. That's what they say.
And it can't be too detailed. That's a really ugly.
It can't be too detailed. You got to do our specific art style. Okay, we're almost halfway through this thing. I promise you guys did not miss anything with the Jewish nonsense. It was pure pain. But all they're saying is that, well, there are pictures in these buildings. We've got pictures on coins and on rings. They're saying we've got pictures. We've got this picture called the Judgment of Solomon. Pictures. Yeah, and he says now they are in Greek style. They're very Greek and Roman.
Contrast to pagan imagery from the same era, which attempted to portray historical realism. As one can see, Pompeii frescoes unearthed in 2024 portray ancient Greek deities and historical figures wearing what they understood to be contemporary garb, particularly the himation. Compare this to standard Roman clothing of the era, the toga. As for the depiction of Solomon, it was likely attached to some function of its patron relating to judgment. The scene and its purpose are otherwise difficult to explain. Due to its symbolic and participatory aspects, it was likely thought to contain the same sort of power that other contemporary holy objects, such as the Seder Square, cross, phylactery, and mezuzah had.
What? They're saying this picture of Solomon had power in it. Just the painting itself had power. Are you guys listening to this? Listen.
Its purpose are otherwise difficult to explain.
Listen to this part. Listen.
Due to its symbolic and participatory aspects.
Symbolic and participatory aspect? Wait, I'm participating in this image somehow? That's what they're literally saying, guys. I'm not making this up.
Purpose are otherwise difficult to explain. Due to its symbolic and participatory aspects, it was likely thought to contain the same sort of power that other contemporary holy objects, such as the Seder square, cross, phylactery, and mezuzah had.
So we're comparing ourselves to superstitious Jews who believe phylacteries are the right way to go. That's how God wants to be worshipped. We walk around with these boxes on our faces.
By following the characters in the painting and directing
But
one's
they
attention onto Solomon,
but they actually think that this painting has some power. What evidence do they have to ever suggest such a thing? The speculation, the desperation drips from every word that comes out of this guy's mouth throughout this entire documentary.
the judge may receive wisdom from Solomon in giving judgment. Meanwhile, the plaintiff and defendant may do the same in the hopes of receiving a just judgment through his intercession.
If you guys are confused, like if you're even wondering what he is saying right now, I'm right with you. I'm saying, what in the world is happening right now?
Theological rationale given for such art at the turn of the 1st century, accepting the authenticity of Ante-Nicene the Areopagite's corpus, suggests otherwise.
So, do you guys accept the corpus, meaning the writings of Dionysius the Areopagite?
Authenticity of now given for such art at the turn of the 1st century.
So listen to this.
Accepting the authenticity of Ante-Nicene the Areopagite's corpus suggests otherwise.
Whoa, we're going
He
to quote
observed, "It is not
Dionysius the
possible."
Areopagite, a completely fake writing. Where is the actual evidence, Harmony? Orthodox, we're begging you to give us some actual evidence that the early church fathers, even one of them, says that we can be bowing down to images and burning incense. Even one, let alone all of them. Because I can actually show you all of them saying, you're an idolater. You're a pagan if you do that. Not just for the first 100 years. Not even just the first 200 years. Not even the first 300. Not even the first 400. I can even show you in the 500s. They're saying this is idolatry. We don't bow down to images. What's he going to say? Here's Dionysius the Areopagite. It's not possible for our mind to be raised up to that immaterial representation and contemplation of the heavenly hierarchies without using the material guidance suitable to itself, accounting the visible beauties as reflections or icons of the invisible comeliness. Isn't that pathetic that even when they're trying to bring forward a quote supporting bowing to images, it still doesn't say anything about bowing to the images or burning incense? And also, it's a very vague quote from a fake book. Painful.
The heaven to Dionysius.
But nice try. There it is again. There's the Orthodox right there. You see the Orthodox? It's a tumor on their forehead. They're like, we're just like the Jews. We have nothing to do with the early church. We are Jews. Jews, 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 Jews. Okay, look, they've got pictures, 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 pictures. That's all they're doing is just showing pictures. They're saying, you know that there were pictures. Yes, we know. We know. We know there were pictures. Do the early church fathers say that we need to have pictures and that that's how we worship God? Do any of them say that? Here, listen to this part. He repeats the same thing from the beginning of the video. He says, this woman who's looking up and spreading her hands, she is actually telling you to do the same thing, to look upward to Christ the Good Shepherd. He's saying she's telling you to venerate the icon because she is looking upward.
Intended response oftentimes was the literal veneration of another icon, as the oran's postures, and sometimes their eyes, when pointed upwards, would direct the worshiper in prayer to the icon of the Good Shepherd.
So guys, I don't know if you knew this, but that picture back here, she's telling you to venerate the icon. That may seem like a stretch to some of you, but I hope you're convinced to worship icons now from this very simple and basic argument that if you ever should walk into a catacomb and you see a painting looking a certain direction, that's proof that you need to be bowing down to whatever other object may be across from it, start bowing to it and worship the image. And that is the source of Christian doctrine. All Christian doctrine comes from these paintings you may find in catacombs or on rings, if you should find a ring anywhere, in your backyard or in anywhere really. Now that you understand where Christian doctrine comes from, it comes from these pictures. There's another picture of Jesus shaved on the left, always Greco-Roman art style, always from ignorant people lacking wisdom, who insult their Lord without realizing it, who are imitating practices of the heathen when they make all these paintings all around. Yeah. Oh, this is a good part. All right, listen to this.
Contains a graffiti which appears to describe that an icon or relic of Mary was adorned, a sort of veneration practice. And another or relic of Mary.
Okay, so let me summarize for you. They say in some graffiti in a grotto says something, 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 under the holy place of M, I wrote there arranging, adornment, her. Now, the brackets, guys, would mean words that are missing. So it doesn't even actually say Mary. It says under the holy place of M, and they're saying, and we would like to believe that that is actually saying Mary. And they say, and we think this also means that, well, that Mary should be venerated. Is that right? So I'll recap, guys. I don't know if you understand this killer evidence for icon veneration and that the early church practiced it. They found in a grotto, they found some hole in the wall, some graffiti that says, under the holy place of M, I wrote the something, arranging something, adornment something, her. All right, guys, hopefully you're convinced by now, all right? You guys ever just stop and wonder, like, doesn't everybody detect the desperation here? These people have nothing. You don't bring evidence like this if you have actual evidence.
It was a Mary, and it criticized Christians.
All right,
veneration.
Nolan, you're not going to believe this one. Are you still with me, Nolan? Get ready for this one. Are you ready, Nolan? Do you see that? Do you see what they're about to say?
Oh no, not that one.
Guys, this is a well-known piece of
Not
graffiti.
that one.
Yeah, they're about to do it. They're about to say this is icon
If I was
veneration.
ever so shameless,
These people
they
are so
need
wicked.
somebody to come in and like clean up their act. Like, look, you can't do this. Like, they need like a lawyer or somebody to come in and be like, you've got to tighten up your argument here. You can't use the graffiti on the wall that is making Christ out to be a jackass. That's not a good look. That was made by somebody that was not a Christian, that was mocking Christians.
It's unbelievable. I'm going to play it in just a second, but first I want you guys to know what this is. This is a well-known piece of graffiti from ancient times and it's made by a pagan. Everybody knows it's made by a pagan who says, oh, so-and-so, I forget what his name is, but they say, so-and-so worships his God. That's what this graffiti says. And they depict Christ with a donkey head and he's crucified. And they show the person next to it that they're making fun of. And so let's hear what Harmony has to say about this random piece of graffiti and how it connects to icon veneration.
Even 2nd or 3rd century pagans that criticized Christians depicted them venerating crucifixes. Concerning the icon of
That's all he had to say. So let me get this straight. You're telling me within the picture itself, the Christian in this picture, he is actually venerating a crucifix because in the picture it shows him standing next to his crucified Lord. So what exactly? He's venerating a crucifix? He's like venerating something else? Like, what? Isn't that supposed to be Jesus next to him? Does it say, the picture itself says the guy on the left is like a real person, and then in the picture, the thing he's venerating is not also an actual person. He's actually venerating an icon or like a picture or like a crucifix or something. I don't think that message was in there. I think they're just showing a crucified Jesus next to a Christian saying, look, he worships this donkey-headed person.
They're mocking the Christian. They're saying, look, they worship a donkey because the donkey was a lowly animal.
Yeah, I don't think he's saying he's worshiping the crucifix. He's worshiping their Lord, and they're saying he's a donkey.
Yeah, like a dumb, donkey, shameful
Exactly.
thing that was crucified. Like, it's a total mockery, not only the cross, but also the donkey.
Yeah. By the way, if we're to take this literally as some kind of instruction, did you know early Christians worshipped crucifixes? Then we have to believe that early Christians worshipped donkey-headed versions of Jesus.
That's where the thumbnail comes from.
Yeah. So we know now Jesus. Actually, the thumbnail is actually a dog-headed saint. He's about to come to it. No, guys, just so you know, then, according to the evidence, Christians did used to worship donkey-headed Jesus. Hope you're convinced now. Look, see, these are some of the earliest pictures and depictions of Jesus. Always shaved, always shaved. He must never have a beard.
god Orpheus fiction. As a representation of Christ, it was not intended to be a realistic depiction. Rather, it deliberately appeared as the shepherd god Orpheus, symbolically depicting Jesus.
So they're admitting that the depictions of Jesus by these early Christians are matching up Greek depictions of Orpheus, Greek and Roman depictions of a Greek and Roman god.
Similarly, in another 3rd century icon, Christ was depicted as the sun god Helios. The grapevines and branches on this icon, borrowed from depictions of Bacchus, the god of wine, symbolically represented the church, the branches in the midst of the true vine, Christ. To the archaeologist, what is apparent is that Christians overtly borrowed and repurposed pagan art forms. There was earlier Jewish precedent for this, as King Hezekiah borrowed Egyptian, Phoenician, and Assyrian pagan imagery for.
What in the world? Are they just attacking themselves? Do they just hate themselves? Like, oh yeah, Christians, they used to borrow pagan imagery, and you know the Jews did it too. King Hezekiah did it too. Is this helping your case? The whole thing is painful, guys. I do not recommend you torturing yourself watching this. They destroy themselves. It's like watching a person stab themselves over and over again. It's not actually enjoyable. You're also going to be stabbing yourself. Also, I won't go back to the image. I skipped it very quickly, okay? But guys, in a lot of these pictures, they are showing naked women in the pictures. I would just say, do you guys actually approve of that? I mean, I know the Catholics do. They've always got naked women. And the Orthodox have some icons. They have a woman named Mary of Egypt. She's naked in the icon. They say she just wasn't able to, get any clothing. She was homeless. So I mean, is this something we as Christians should be doing, depicting like naked women being baptized and such? What makes you think this is a Christian practice? Christians ought to be doing this. This is clearly people who are ignorant, probably people who are very wealthy because they can afford this, people who are trying their best to worship God but who really don't know how to. Maybe they're new converts, they're uninstructed. I mean, these people could be heretics for all you know. You don't even know who these people are. We know that the heretics did have a special affinity for painting, as we hear multiple church fathers say, like Irenaeus, Eusebius, Hippolytus. They say that the heretics really like to have images. They like to have images of Jesus. So again, where is the actual church endorsing this? You can't just show somebody did something. I can show you some people committing sins. Now you need to prove that they're not sins. You have to show that the church endorsed these things. You can't just show people did things. Look, they had pictures. Are these wise people? Why are you showing all these immodest people, by the way? No more immodest people. We don't want to see that. All right, here we go. We get to Irenaeus. Fine. Oh, Nolan. Okay, Nolan, are you surprised? Who are they going to go to next to prove image veneration?
And were the direct objects of veneration themselves, like mezuzahs. 2nd century written evidence further corroborates this. The Gnostic Acts of John criticizes someone for making an icon of John and venerating it via crowning. The author clearly understood this to be an extant practice, though.
An extant practice. That just means it's being practiced currently in his time. So they say the author who criticizes this in his story, well, he understands image veneration to be an extant practice. What? What insinuation is there in this entire book that Christians are regularly doing this? All they do is depict some idiot pagan, a recent convert, doing this, making images of John and then being criticized, bashed for it by the Apostle John, saying, don't you ever do this again. This is pagan. This is idolatry. And they're like, yeah, but we know that the one who wrote this story, he is recognizing this is what most people do. There's no insinuation of that anywhere. And even more so, why don't you notice the fact that it's being condemned? But I told you guys, the Catholics and Orthodox use the Acts of John. They use this book to prove icon veneration because they have nothing else. They'll use the thing destroying them, condemning them, because it's the closest they can get. They say, well, it's really early. This condemnation of image worship is really early, and we speculate, we hope, we wish that it was a very common practice, and that this guy writing this book saying that somebody actually did this, he's like trying to go against the grain and get people to stop doing it.
Oh, he, outside the pale of mainstream Christianity, disagreed with it.
Outside the pale of mainstream Christianity, disagreed with it. That's what they say about the writer of Acts of John. He's outside the pale of mainstream Christianity. Can you believe the wickedness? All right, here's Irenaeus. Oh, they dare bring up Irenaeus. Again, guys, all they can appeal to is Irenaeus or any church father condemning Christians having images and saying, well, hey, we think it was probably mainstream. Okay, so again, we say you have a clear choice. You can choose what the church fathers are saying, or you can choose the clearly condemned heretical pagan practice. But let's hear what Irenaeus says.
Irenaeus, an Orthodox source, relates a Gnostic group that crowned icons, something he mentions neutrally, only to then criticize the same group for other modes of veneration, like
he says he mentions icons neutrally.
Those of the pagans, probably sacrificial.
Wow. He says when Irenaeus brings up the fact that they worship images, they crown images, he does that neutrally. Well, tell me, guys, do you know what it means to talk about something neutrally? First of all, if you were to talk about images neutrally, you would not write a book called Against heresies. And then within that book say, there is a heretical sect. They possess images, some of them painted, and others formed from different kinds of materials. They maintain that a likeness of Christ was made by Pilate at that time when Jesus lived among them. They crowned these images. Guys, do you think he could say things like that if he's just completely neutral and the church is currently doing this?
He also says at the end that they do this after the manner of the Gentiles. So I don't know why he highlighted that, because
Yes.
that refutes him.
Yes, everything he just mentioned is after the manner of the Gentiles. He says they also have other modes of honoring these images. Well, do you know what the other modes are? It would be things like lighting candles and burning incense. And I can show that because even dear Eusebius says the same thing. Let's see if I can find it here. He says, give me just a second here. I've got a really good quote. You're going to really enjoy this quote. I need to add it to the website, so I'm glad we're doing this. I need to add this quote from Eusebius. Eusebius says in Church History, Book 2, Chapter 13, Paragraph 6, he says, "We have understood that Simon was the author of all heresy. From his time down to the present, those who have followed his heresy have feigned the sober philosophy of the Christians, which is celebrated among all on account of its purity of life." So Christians are pure. How so? He says, "But they, these Gnostics, they nevertheless have embraced again the superstition of idols, which they seem to have renounced, and they fall down before pictures and images of Simon himself and of the above-mentioned Helena who was with him, and they venture to worship them with incense and sacrifices and libations." So this is exactly what Irenaeus is talking about when he says, and they also have other modes of honoring these images. This is not a speculation, guys. This is the exact same heretical sect. Eusebius says they offer incense to these images of Simon Magus. It's the stupid Gnostics. So we know that is the way they honor images, and of course the Catholics and Orthodox do the same thing. Painful. This is all they have.
The fact the later merited criticism, but not the former, implies the former was acceptable and likely common during the pre-Nicene era, due to it not being propitiatory.
Due to it not being propitiatory? What strange wrangling of words. No, the whole thing is being condemned. Over and over again, all of this is being condemned. They possess images, some of them painted. Do you think that he would be talking like that? They have images, some of them painted, and they have images of Jesus. Do you think he'd be saying that if all Christians had images? Like, they have images. Oh, and of course, we all have images. I mean, they're not weird for that. No, he wrote a book called Against Heresies, and he's telling you the bizarre evil practices of other heretical sects. It's so obvious. Anybody who had read the Church Fathers would know that, but it's just so sad. People don't realize this is a book called Against Heresies, where he's condemning heresies. And he's telling you the practices of other people, which are not shared with the Christians.
Scholarship in recent years has begun recognizing the preceding. Matthews and Muller observe, icons were intimately connected with the origins and growth of Christianity itself.
Wow, thank you for telling us that. How about some evidence? So, more torture ahead. They're just showing pictures. We've got pictures. He says some early pictures did have things like people all gathering around a literal lamb. And he says, the Orthodox and Catholics have since banned this. We say don't ever depict Jesus as a lamb because that's going to mess with proper Christology. You're not going to understand Jesus' divinity, the relationship between his human and divine nature properly if you're always depicting him as a lamb. And so they say we banned that, we outlaw that. And they just give some stories from people way after the Council of Nicaea saying, oh, there are paintings. People have paintings of martyrs. Yes, we know. We're well aware. Can you show us the church saying that we're allowed to bow to these images and burn incense to them? There's another depiction of the lamb there. It's Trust me, you're not missing anything. There's the lamb imagery again. There's a dog. There's the dog saint.
Symbolism is sometimes retained in icons, such as St. John the Baptist being portrayed as an angel or St. Christopher as a dog-headed saint.
You know, Nolan, how Origen was talking about the angel. Behold, I send my angel before your face. Apparently, a lot of them depicted John the Baptist as having angel wings, but we're not going to discuss that.
Combining realism and symbolism is realistic inasmuch that what it represents is clear and identifiable. It is also symbolic due to its idealized portrayal having intentional theological significance.
He's just throwing, this is true word salad. He's just throwing random words together. Let's hear it one more time.
Symbolic as much that what it represents is clear and identifiable. It is also symbolic due to its idealized portrayal having intentional theological significance.
Thank you. You were really smart to throw all those words together like that. Great job. All right, here we go. We've got another church father. It took a long time to get to another quote of a church father. Will he endorse image worship? Here we go. This is him writing in the late 300s.
Epiphanius records that the majority of clergy defended icon veneration, explaining that instead of treating icons as idols, which receive sacrifices, we make images of the saints in their memory, and we prostrate ourselves in front of them in their honor.
Whoa, did Epiphanius, the guy who tore down a curtain of Christ that he found in a church, and who in his Panarion condemned Christians having images 6 times? 6 out of the 80 heresies in the Panarion are Epiphanius condemning Christians who have images. And then we have the well-known story of him destroying the curtain when he walked into a church because it had an image of Jesus or some saint. He says, you know that we don't have this as Christians. Don't ever do this. You're going to induce people to start worshiping images. Making this big, pretty image. But whoa, what a shock, what a complete change all of a sudden. Now we have a quote from Epiphanius saying, we make images of the saints in their memory, and we prostrate ourselves in front of them in their honor. Whoa, let's see the note here. It is possible these quotes were falsely ascribed and were actually written by a contemporary. This is in the 700s that these quotes first appeared. This is at the Second Council of Nicaea. And by the way, the Catholics admit these quotes are completely fake. Everybody knows it. Epiphanius is completely against icons. See, they have to, it's so hard for them. They've got to use the fake quotes used at the Second Council of Nicaea, which everybody knows are fake. But they also have to attack Epiphanius and say, well, when he's attacking images, he's attacking the mainstream practice. Both have to be true at the same time. Both Epiphanius hates the mainstream practice and he endorses it in these fake quotes. Hilarious. But I don't feel sorry for these people. So, to recap, this is a completely fake quote. Epiphanius never said any such thing. And they even have to make a little note, because they know somebody's going to nail him. They say, yeah, it's possible these were falsely ascribed to Epiphanius, and they were actually written by a contemporary. A contemporary. These quotes never appeared in his time. Completely fake. So far, how many church fathers have they quoted? They quote Irenaeus bashing images. They quote Epiphanius bashing images. They quote Eusebius bashing images. They quote Acts of John bashing images. That's 4. That's 4 strikes. When are they going to have somebody supporting images? From even the first 400 years of church history. Painful. Painful. They're like, look at these little coins. They've got pictures on them. Look, guys, we got coins. We've got coins, guys. We've got coins. We've got shaved Jesus, everybody. We've got naked women in the pictures. We've got pagan depictions of Christ as Bacchus or as Sol, as Apollo, or we've got him as all the different sun gods. We've got all kinds of pagan imagery, guys. There he is again.
Example of such being dated to.
There he is. That's Christ as Sol Invictus. See, guys, see. The pagans were kind of mixing things up with Christianity as they were converting to Christianity. Yeah. Are you convinced yet? Are you convinced? Oh, wait, we're just destroying our own view? What? Whoa, well, look at all these lines. Are you convinced yet? I did watch this, though. I'm mocking it because we ought to mock it. We ought to mock the idiocy. How many millions of dollars did this one room cost?
His divine essence, being invisible and thereby incapable of depiction, icons of these men and women cannot be simply literal or strictly realistic. Just as symbolism was employed in Israelite pre-apostolic times to convey theological truths behind invisible, unseen realities, symbolism was now implemented in a sense that melded with the realistic, visible realities of the prototypes that were represented. The canonical icon we know today was devised from this. This
The canonical icon. They, of course, don't let you make any icon you want. You may not venerate any icon that you made, guys. You need a canonical icon. They call them the approved icons. Did you know you're not allowed to bow down to an image that you made? It has to be something that you bought from the church that cost several hundreds of dollars. And by the way, you're encouraged to buy a lot of them. For spiritual reasons, of course. Get closer to God. Is this a picture of the ladder of divine ascent by John Climacus? Why would they put a picture, an icon of the ladder of divine ascent written by John Climacus? This is a picture based on the writing of that man who lived in the 500s. Why would they do such a thing? That doesn't make any sense. Let's read John Climacus. Here's John Climacus, who lived from 579 to 649. That's the picture. It's a picture based on something he wrote about. He wrote a book called Ladder of Divine Ascent, where he says, here are all the steps to become a more spiritual man, to become a Christian, and to be the most holy kind of Christian. And he was a monk, so of course he believed that he was on that road. He was climbing that ladder. So I just thought I would mention this. Why in the world would they bring up John Climacus and a beautiful icon of something he depicted of us going up the ladder and trying to get to heaven, when John Climacus condemns icon veneration? And this is in the 600s. This is step 17 in his book, The Ladder of Divine Ascent. He says, poverty is the resignation of cares, life without anxiety, an unencumbered traveler. That just means you're not heavily weighed down by a lot of possessions. Alienation from sorrow, fidelity to the commandments. That just means being faithful to the commandments. He says, when he becomes a solitary, a monk, he regards everything as dung. That means poop. So he's saying this is the great thing about being poor, is that now you're not weighed down heavily by possessions. You look at everything, all physical possessions, as just dung. And he says, but if he worries about something, he has not yet become poor. A poor man is pure in prayer, but the lover of possessions prays to images of wood. And I have it here in the Greek if anybody would like to verify he really said that. He said, those who live in obedience are strangers to love of money. You think a monk could say this if he liked the idea of big golden icons? He says, he who has tasted of the things above easily scorns the things below. But he who has not tasted the things above finds joy in possessions. He who despises matter is rid of quarrels and controversies.
Despises matter.
Despises matter? But what about the
Doesn't he
divine
know
icons?
that in the incarnation, Jesus redeemed all matter?
I thought he redeemed all the matter. That's what the Orthodox told me. I gotta despise.
Maybe this guy was a Gnostic, Luke.
He's-
Maybe this sounds awfully Gnostic, doesn't it?
You guys realize he's one of their favorite saints, but I'm convinced they've never actually read Ladder of Divine Ascent.
They don't read.
That's very dangerous to actually read the writings of these men. And
They
I've got
saw the picture.
They saw that one picture though. It's a great icon. See, people make icons of maybe something the church fathers talk about, or just an icon of a church father, and then nobody actually reads the book that the icon is based on. And the book says, yeah, if you pray to icons, your prayers are going up to God impure. He says, but the covetous man will fight to the death just for a needle. This is the 17th step. He who has mounted it is journeying to heaven, stripped of material things. There's the Greek in case you doubt that he actually said that. This was a monk. This is one of their big saints. They love John Climacus. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. These frauds, quoting that man.
Judaism and early Christianity. Rabbinic Judaism,
Well, not quoting him, but just showing an image.
and Islam are iconoclastic and avoid all depictions of religious figures whatsoever. This is
Wait a second. What?
iconoclastic and early Christianity. Rabbinic Judaism and Islam are iconoclastic and avoid all depictions of religious figures whatsoever.
So they admit Rabbinic Judaism repudiates all images. But guys, you can read the early Jewish writings. You can read their most respected Jews, even living at the time of Christ in the first and second century, like Josephus and Philo and all the others. They are all the same. It's not just Rabbinic Judaism. It's not just the Judaism that came after Christ, after they rejected their Savior. They had always rejected images. And if anybody ever says the stupid retort, well, don't you remember the pomegranate pictures in the temple? Huh? You can say, well, that if there were pomegranate pictures in the temple, and you know the Jews repudiate images, that proves they don't consider a picture of the trees to be an actual image. In their mind, an image is something you set up to be worshipped. Just a kid outside, if he's drawing in the dirt and draws a picture, nobody considers that to be an image. You have made for yourself an image. They mean something it's actually being constructed for the purpose of bowing to it and burning incense. How do you know that? Because even the things that God told them to create, such as the bronze serpent, that's something approved by God, even that became abominable and needed to be destroyed when the Jews did what to it? They bowed to it and burned incense to it. Do you guys know the verse? They were bowing to the god Nehushtan, and that was something that was approved by God for them to create, but it needed to be destroyed. This so-called holy object needed to be destroyed if people were bowing to it and burning incense to it. And they always want to bring that up and say, don't you know God said they could build the bronze serpent? It had to be destroyed when people bowed to it and burned incense to it. Crazy people. All right, we can only stand so much more of this story.
Israelite Judaism, which did create depictions such as that of the cherubim.
Yeah, we know. Depictions of the cherubim, we know. And they were veiled all year round. Nobody actually got to see it. And then when they did get to see it, Christ was appearing above it. So no, those were not objects of veneration for the people. God was always leading them up to the spiritual contemplation by keeping these things veiled. He wants you to think about their spiritual realities. But they are averse to anything spiritual, unless it's a demon.
Theological realities, which is why important features like the halo are often conspicuously absent for the sake of historicity. The symbolism that is employed by Western art forms is intended to generate an emotional response in the onlooker in admiration of the art form's beauty.
So it may be very subtle, guys. You have to be familiar with their heresies to know what he's doing here. But he's bashing Western, meaning Catholic, paintings. He's saying there's way too much detail. These paintings are very detailed, and there's lots of emotion in these. And he says, but we Orthodox never put emotion in our icons. You guys may have noticed that in Orthodox pictures, they're not as detailed as these super finely painted Catholic and Western images, and that they're also emotionless in Orthodox icons.
The Orthodox themselves are emotionless.
Well, unless it's toward the devil, then they get excited. So this is their own art style, guys. They're like little anime fans. Like they've got their own little clique. They've got their own favorite art style. They're like Studio Ghibli. They're like, this is our favorite one. This is the only holy art style. And the Westerners, the Catholics, they're really bad because their icons have emotion on them, and they're in big trouble for that. And they're also too detailed. It's like some little club they have for anime art style.
Yes.
But not
graphics.
Yeah, this is my favorite graphics art style.
Venerable thoughts directed towards the prototype depicted and the grace residing in that individual.
Oh, wow, that's so spiritual. Did you hear what Harmony Guy just said? He said, you need to be focused more on the grace. You need to be focused on the spiritual aspects and not just the image itself and the details in it. Let's play it one more time. That is hilarious.
Emotional response in the onlooker in admiration of the art form's beauty, but not venerable thoughts directed towards the prototype depicted and the grace residing in that individual.
See, you need to have venerable thoughts toward the prototype and the grace residing in that individual of the icon. Don't be too obsessed with the icon, he's saying. Don't be obsessed with the beauty of it. Don't be obsessed with the details. It should be depicted fairly simply, he's saying. Not too much detail. See, guys, that's like a pseudo-spiritual mindset where don't be obsessed with beauty. Instead, think about the spiritual aspects. But they're still wanting an icon. There still has to be a picture. I could go farther than I could make a stick figure of Mary. See, I'm being more spiritual. I'm not obsessed with the details, with the realism. You guys, I can detect some emotion in your Orthodox icons. I'm sorry. I can see some facial expression. I don't want to see a facial expression, okay? I want a stick figure. That is pure spiritual thinking, okay?
For this reason, many modern Roman Catholics and Protestants, though appreciating their art, do not understand their art properly as icons. They do not pray towards these depictions, kiss them, or believe that they exude power as windows into heaven.
You guys, did you catch the big error of the Catholics? They just don't love their icons enough. They aren't kissing them all the time like the Orthodox are. They're pointing out the fact that when the Catholics make their big paintings, they aren't necessarily designed to be kissed and loved on. But the Orthodox are much more serious. When they make their icons, they're designed to be kissed. Unless it's one that they stuck on the ceiling. Good luck kissing that one. Let's play this part one more time. It's really good. This is the best part.
Appreciating. For this reason, many modern Roman Catholics and Protestants, though appreciating their art, do not understand their art properly as icons. They do not pray towards these depictions, kiss them, or believe that they exude power as windows into heaven.
Do you guys know the icons exude power? There's power in them. Hey, if you ever heard an Orthodox or a Catholic saying, we're not praying to the images, we're praying to the person represented in the image. Oh, really? Is that why you next say that they are powerful? They exude power. You must pray to the icon. God wants to be prayed to through an icon. Don't just pray to the saint. Look at a picture of the saint and try to forget how much money you spent on that icon. Or actually be proud of it. Go to your friends. How much money have you spent on God's holy icons? I've spent $10,000. I love God more than you.
This is because, though their art is religious, they are not intended as icons and are, in fact, not icons.
Oh, they're not icons. You see the superiority complex going on in these people? Our icons are better than your icons. Oh, it's just so childish. People actually get involved in it. They get caught up in this little battle between the Catholics and Orthodox, not over actual heresies, but over whose pictures are better. My picture's better than your picture. Whose picture's better? Well, mine's more realistic. Yeah, but that's lame. Shouldn't be too realistic. Shouldn't be 3D. You know that the Orthodox believe the Catholics are idolaters because they have statues? Say, that's idolatry. It needs to be two-dimensional. Well, this is it, though, guys. This is all the pain I had for you. I'm not going to watch any more of this. Oh, man. See, I'm looking at this. I'm thinking they're actually putting quite a bit of work into all of this. Look at this. And they have gold leaf and everything.
To inspire increasingly beautiful and new kinds of canonical iconography.
Canonical iconography, saying it needs to be canonized. It needs to be approved by the bishops before you bow to it. I mean, look at that. This requires a lot of artistic prowess to make this particular art style. Don't pretend this isn't very elaborate, but they're like, no, it's not about realism. It's about the art style. Okay, all right. Don't let me get between you and your favorite anime art style.
The bridge and nose has to be very weird looking.
Well, that's it, though, guys. That's the end. The history of early Christian icons. Why was there no actual representation from the early church? See, it's called Early Christian History of Early Christians Icons. I wish we could have had a little bit more of the early Christians in here, you know? History of Early Christian Icons. Could we have some church fathers endorsing it instead of only people condemning it? That's the one disappointing thing. And there it is, Craig Truglia, who we made the video about recently. So to recap, guys, I only detected 4 quotes in there from the church fathers. We had Irenaeus condemning images, saying the pagans or the heretics possess these images, and they bow to them, and they have other forms of revering them. And Eusebius talks about the same group and says, yeah, they burn incense to him, these freaks. So we've got Irenaeus condemning it, then we've got Eusebius condemning them, saying they're pagans, and then we've got who else? We've got Acts of John, and Acts of John is actually condemning it again. Oh man! And then we've got Epiphanius, but the quote from Epiphanius is fake, and they had to make a little note about that. That's actually a fake quote, but just forget about that. And then they did have one other person. They had Pseudo-Dionysius the Areopagite, a completely fake writing. Everybody knows it's not even real. It's from the 500s or maybe 600s. They're saying, well, that's the best we could do. Okay, are you convinced now? Why hasn't somebody destroyed these doctrines yet? The Protestants put up the weakest attack because they don't say what we're saying. They don't say, no, the early church condemns you guys. They say, nah, we just think it's a bad idea. Bad idea. Second commandment, God forbids it. And then the Catholics and Orthodox will say, yeah, well, we can prove that there were pictures back then on the walls. We can prove that. And then the Protestant is speechless and says, man, apparently they did have pictures of some kind. Well, I choose not to be Orthodox. I'm a Protestant. No, these people need to be thoroughly refuted. I think this is a sufficient refutation. Okay, all right. I just was going to share this with Nolan, but it was nice seeing all the rest of you. Very good seeing everybody. Hope it wasn't too torturous. This is the opponent. These are the ones who need to be refuted. These are the people Not these people who make the actual documentaries, but the people who they're deceiving who need to be rescued from this. Yeah, exactly. Adriana, you said it. You have people like Gavin Ortland. They don't effectively refute this nonsense. They say, well, it's an accretion, or they'll use some harmless word to say, well, it was a development. No, you need to call this what it is, a heresy. One of the worst sins. Idolatry, or iconolatry, whatever you want to call it. Same thing. These heresies were invented to kill your soul and to separate you from God for eternity. You can't just call it an accretion. There are no Protestants refuting this. But at least you guys are free, and we'll make better resources as time goes by. I was just doing a quick recap of this nonsense documentary that somebody suggested we watch. They said, have you seen that documentary made by the Orthodox? So, yes, I have seen it. I watched it last night with my wife, and I watched a little bit of it today with you so you can see the pain. Church fathers are your best weapon. I want to repeat one more time in case anybody missed it. Guys, the only thing you should be asking for, if somebody says, hey, you don't believe the doctrines of the church, you're missing the true doctrines, there's only one response. You say, I see, I'm mistaken about something. Okay, please do show me where the church unanimously teaches what you're saying. That's all you need. What was the point of 42 minutes of showing mezuzahs, a little bit of scripture written on a wall that the Jews used to put on these blocks, and saying this is some prototype of icons, or showing the Ark of the Covenant or something? Why are you showing me all that stuff if you can just show me the church fathers unanimously saying that? He's got a 42-minute long video saying that we should be bowing to images and burning incense to them. I could make a 5 or 6 hour long video that consists entirely of me just reading quotes from the church fathers condemning this. It could probably be 7 or 8 hours long, honestly. But they can't even bring one quote from the church fathers endorsing this. Not even one quote in 42 minutes. But they do tell you this comes from pagan practice. I've said all I'm going to say. I'm heading out. I got to eat my lunch. Farewell, guys. It was nice seeing you. Or I'll stay here if you want. I'll just stop the recording unless somebody has something to say. You're right, Robert. The Protestants are just really lazy. They're also just total heretics themselves. And if they were ever to appeal to the early church's authority, then they would be condemning themselves on a lot of different issues. I'll stop sharing.